So this morning we're going to talk about CSS animations and transitions. And this afternoon we're going to have kind of an open review session. So just wanted to make a public service announcement that the review sessions go much smoother if you guys have questions. So please don't be shy. If there's anything that you want more coverage on, I know in our stand-up that there's been a couple of specific questions and topics. So please do bring those this afternoon. We want to cover that stuff. So this morning, our lesson objectives, I just pasted them into Slack. So we're going to talk about the roles of traditional animation and how it applies to computer animation. We're going to create some basic transitions with a start and an end state in CSS. We're going to write complex animations with multiple states and then use jQuery for animations. So to give you guys kind of a little hook or a little taste, I want to share my screen. Did anyone watch the Broncos Panthers game last night? Not really. Kelly, you watched it?
A little bit. I'm actually playing fantasy football for the first time.
Oh, nice.
I have Cam, so it was my first big night. Yeah.
Yeah, Cam got his brain scrambled last night a couple of times, huh? And he was flossing on the sidelines. It was pretty impressive. So last night, as I was watching a little bit of that game, I decided to go ahead and start hacking on my awesome blackjack game that I'm going to build along with you guys for my project one. So I wanted to show you guys a little bit of what I was hacking around with last night because this incorporates three things one thing that we went over yesterday, which is CSS sprites. And it's also, there are two topics that I put in here that we're going to cover this morning: animations and transformations. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick taste. There is no JavaScript in what you're about to see. This is all CSS, which is pretty cool because CSS has come a long way. And what you're about to see, historically, the only way to accomplish these types of animations was using JavaScript. But now CSS3 has come so far that it's really powerful, and you can do a lot of cool things with it. So I'm going to just refresh my page. This is pretty bare bones. When I refresh my page, so I'm dealing from the shoe. Again, there is no logic to this. It's just visuals. I'm just like kicking the tires. But I'll do that one more time. Isn't that fun? Everyone gets a blackjack. How about that? This must be a 6-deck shoe because we have two ace-king of hearts there. The odds are pretty low for that. But let me just quickly walk you through kind of the three features of this awesome blackjack app. So the first thing that we talked about yesterday were sprites. And so here is a sprite. I just Googled blackjack playing cards, that kind of thing. And I found a pretty cool sprite that I downloaded. And so this has just a ton of options, right? And we talked about, well, does someone want to come on mic and give us a recap of why CSS sprites are so powerful and a really good tool to incorporate into your application? Why might we want to use CSS sprites?
Downloading one large image is faster than downloading a bunch of small images.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good example of that. So not only do I have 52 cards to consider, but maybe I want to play with some different sized chips, some other, I don't know, whatever other features that I want to put in here, but that's a lot of stuff to download. But with the sprite, all I have to do is download this one file, and I can use CSS to position the file and kind of carve out the sprites. And so that's what I did here in my HTML. Again, this is just really quick and dirty what I did last night, but I just created 6 divs, and so each of these cards is a div. And so it took me a minute, again, to kind of carve out the sprites and the positioning for each card. I also put a little bit of a border radius on these cards to give it like this little rounded edge just for grins. So that is the sprite component. Now, the other two features of this are animations and kind of a transition or a transformation, excuse me. So let me slow this process down real quick. Right now, I'm having this animation run over 1 second. But I'm going to slow this down to like 10 seconds. And so we'll get a little bit more of an idea of what I created, which is what we're going to do today. So I'm going to make the animation go over 10 seconds. I'll refresh the page here on a slow motion. So I'm having it do a couple little spinny transformations, and then some animations, then the cards spread out. So this is what we're going to walk over this morning. But I'm using some animations. I'm using a concept called keyframes that we're going to discuss to create the animations. And then the transformations, like the rotations and such, those are more transformation type CSS properties, and we'll talk about that as well. But anywho, just want to give you guys kind of a practical, fun example of what we're going to go through this morning. So there you go. I'm going to stop my share. And to get started, let's go ahead and set up our workspace like we did yesterday, because we'll be doing a little bit of a code along this morning. So I'll paste this into Slack. So if you would, go ahead and CD into your Student Labs folder and create a new folder for this morning's coverage called Animation Lesson, if you're so inclined. And then let's touch animate.html and animate.css and do the HTML structure. And also want you guys to go ahead and pull in the jQuery library and put that in the head of your HTML page, and that'll get us started. So let's take a minute to do that. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up in Slack if you would when you've finished those steps, and I'm going to do that myself here. Has anyone, you Blackjack fans out there, has anyone heard or played of a variant of Blackjack called Blackjack Switch? Has anyone heard of that or played that? I saw that over the summer and I got really addicted to it. I don't think the odds are quite as good, but man, it's a lot of fun. So kind of the gist is, actually I think that's what I'm gonna create my Blackjack game, this Blackjack Switch type game. But the idea is that you're dealt two hands and you try to make the best possible hand of the two hands. So what you can do is you can swap the top cards if you want. So you can swap the cards to try to make the best two hands versus the dealer's hand. So I don't know, it's kind of fun. Again, the odds are not quite as great as straight up blackjack if you're playing correctly, but the other thing is that I think if the dealer actually hits 22, it's a push. So they actually can go a little bit higher than 21, obviously. Then anything over 22 is a bust. But so it's slightly different, but it's fun. So I'm excited to try to figure out the logic to build that game. But it's very addictive if anyone sees Blackjack Switch out there in your casino travels, because it actually isn't at many casinos. I kind of stumbled across it. Okay, let me finish my setup here. How many folks we got? 5 thumbs up, okay. And I'll just give you guys one more kind of goofy life lesson from Mark. Just some of my experience with students and my personal experience as far as creating projects and interviewing and with recruiters and stuff. So I'll pull up a chair. I'll give you a quick anecdote while we're waiting on the rest of the folks. So the whole gist of all these animations and stuff, arguably, the logic in the back end type of code in most cases is, a lot of times that's more complex than the visuals, although the visuals can be very complex and exciting and very difficult to create really compelling visuals. However, in my experience, I've found that when you guys go out and you apply for jobs, or you go for interview for jobs, or if you talk to recruiters and such at meetups, in my experience, I've found that most of the time, the people that you're going to talk to and the people with the power to kind of get you in the door or even to hire you, a lot of times they're just reading words off a piece of paper. For this job, I need someone that knows Angular and CSS and HTML. The people that are actually the stakeholders, like, have no idea about these technologies, right? Somebody gave them a piece of paper with some requirements. They really have no idea what's going on under the hood. And if you showed them some back-end code, they would just be completely lost. That being said, sometimes having like a shiny little animation, no matter how simple or how easy it is to implement, sometimes those shiny little animations just like blow people's minds, right? So you could have the most complex backend known to man, like this really amazing piece of code, but if you have a shiny little animation, that is what's going to blow a recruiter's mind, and they're going to think you're Mark Zuckerberg or something. So it's kind of ironic, but sometimes there's something to be said for like a little bit of visual polish and animation in your apps, even if you're more focused on backend opportunities. Unfortunately, sometimes recruiters are very impressed with like spinning playing cards, you know? So I just wanted to put that out there. Something to consider. All right, 14 folks are set up, so that works for me. Let's move forward. So the first thing I want to do is let's talk a little bit about the roles in traditional animation and how this applies to computer animation, specifically when we talk about using CSS to create some animations like the blackjack example that I showed you. So in traditional hand-drawn animation, there were two kinds of animators, right? There were keyframe artists and in-betweeners, or tweeners, if you will. Now, the keyframe artist, and there's an image here in what I just selected out, the keyframe artist would draw the main frames for the animation. So they may draw kind of the beginning animation and the ending animation, like the really important parts of the sequence. These in-betweener people, artists and such, they would fill in the gaps. They would actually create the frames to get from point A to point B. Those were called the in-betweeners. So in computer animation, specifically what we're going to do today, we're going to act as the keyframe artist. So using CSS, we're going to create, start and endpoints for our CSS rules and properties. And then CSS is going to go in and fill in the gaps, fill in the blanks. So CSS is going to act as the in-betweener artist, if you will. Any questions about that? About starting and ending keyframes? This word and concept of keyframe is really what we're going to be diving into this morning. Okay. So let's move forward. Let's actually play around a little bit with these technologies. So let's start by creating a basic transition between a start and an end state using CSS. So the first thing we want to do is define a start and end state on a particular element. So I'm going to share my screen. Feel free to kind of code along if you want. We'll have a little bit of a you-do exercise time in a few minutes, but of course you're welcome to code along with me if you're so inclined. So I'm going to share my screen now, and let's walk through an example of setting up a simple animation. Cool, so here we go. I have my animate.html code here, my animate.css section, and then my browser plus, which I'm going to use today. So to start, here in the body tag, let's just create a basic, a link tag that we'll play around with. So if you want to go ahead and create that. And then we're going to add some rules and properties to this in our CSS. But if you want to just create an empty link tag, it doesn't have to go anywhere. You can just create that. And so it should look something like this, just a basic link. And then in Animate CSS, I'm going to create some property. I'm going to create a rule for my A tag based on this block of code that's in the README. So I'm going to create some rules here. I'm going to make this a little bit more visible. So I'm going to make some padding just to make it stand out a little bit more. I want to create a little bit of kind of a box around this link so we can play around with it. So I'm going to add some padding of 2em. I want this display to display inline block, just in case I put other elements around it or something. I'll put a border just so we can see this a little clearer. I'll do a 1px solid black, just so it'll stand out a little bit. I'm going to do a position relative. The left I'm going to define as 0. So I want this hugging the left-hand side of my screen. And then let's do a background of yellow.
Hey, Mark, sorry, is that left? Is that margin left? What, I haven't seen that before.
So it applies to kind of the body tag. So it's positioned all the way to the left hand, like hugging the left hand of the screen. So this is a little bit different from like margin left or padding left or border left. This is literally like, it's a more absolute type of property. So this is going to start all the way on the left-hand side of the parent element.
Oh, is this like that absolute positioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the same ballpark. We're using position relative for this example, but you can play around with it. We're going to do some more like top and left positioning later. Top and left came in really important. For example, when I was building my blackjack example from last night. So I had to position the cards. It's more, you can think of top and left and right and bottom as more of coordinates, like XY coordinates on, maybe a grid or something, which is a little different than padding, border, and margin. So those are more like kind of for spacing and like sticking out the elbows in like a club. When I go clubbing, like I want to have my elbows to give myself, my content, a little bit of room. Whereas top, left, right, and bottom are more like XY coordinates. I guess it would be a more precise place to start your element. So for this one, if I had left of 0 and top of 0, the top left-hand corner of this element, that's the coordinate. It's going to be 0, 0. Hope that's helpful. We'll be playing around with those a little bit later, but top left, right and bottom, you can think of as kind of XY coordinates. Now something, it's here in the README, I want to make clear. So this first set of rules that we're making for our A tag, you can think of this as the start state for our A tag. So in terms of animation and keyframes, this is going to be the start state. I'll put a little comment in here for our A tags. And so next we'll, obviously define like an end state, and then we'll let CSS kind of fill in the gaps in between. So I just want to make sure that this is working correctly. So if I refresh, I can see that, I have a little bit of space here. I just want to visually be able to see this a little bit better. Give that a little bit more room there. Cool. So right now it doesn't do anything. We haven't added any animations and such. But let's add a hover pseudo property here, pseudo selector. And I'm going to put a background of green on here. So this is just kind of a basic example to get us started, but you can think of this as the end state. We went over pseudo selectors yesterday, but this is kind of like an entry, a gateway drug to our animation talk. So even with this example, we have a start state, which is the background is yellow for this A tag. But when we add the pseudo selector of hover, the end state, when we activate that hover kind of pseudo selector, is that the background turns green. So green would be the end state for this tag. So this is a very, kind of a starter example of what animations are going to do for you. So we'll have a start state, an end state, and then we're going to tell CSS how to fill in the gaps there. Very simple example just to get us started here. So now that we have our tag defined, we've created our tag, I'll draw your attention to the screenshot that I put into Slack. When we talk about transitions and animations, there's three main properties that I wanted to point your attention to. So there's a transition dash property. And so this, some of the values could be background, left, top, and height, just for example. Again, with all of the CSS coverage, we're just kind of hitting the greatest hits. If you want like some more deeper dive details, you could definitely check out the documentation. So there's transition property, there's transition duration. So like my blackjack example, how long do I want this animation to take place? Over what period of time? Now, unlike maybe our set intervals and our event handlers, which take timing in thousands, like in milliseconds, if you will. So 1,000 milliseconds would be 1 second. When we talk about these CSS properties, we don't use the milliseconds. As you can see here, we can just use the number 1, the value of 1 would equal 1 second, for example. So I'll put this into Slack. So that transition duration of 0.5 seconds would be half a second. So you don't have to worry about the extra zeros and stuff. Transition timing function. So there's several different ways that CSS can build that kind of tweener or in-betweener process. So there's ease, linear, ease in, ease out, ease in and out. There's also cubic Bezier, maybe butchering that. It's a little bit more advanced, but if you're really good with like your coordinates and positioning, you can be very exact about what you want that in-betweener process to look like. If you want the element to be at different points on the screen at different points in time. Then transition delay. So when I hover over this, do I want a little bit of a pause before that animation takes effect? And then there's also a shorthand way to write these properties. So if you want to have several of these properties on a particular element, you don't necessarily have to list them out individually. With CSS, you can just use transition, and then you can list each different property with a semicolon after it. You can kind of list it all as the value for this one transition property. And we're going to take a look at how to do that. But if you want to, write a little bit less code, you can certainly do it with just the transition property and then add your specifics after it. Cool. Any questions before we add some more animations to this? Alrighty, so let's actually make this a little more interesting. Let's see this in action. So we're going to do this you-do here. So there's 3 steps to this. I'll give you like a minute or two if you want to hack on this on your own. If you want to reference the various transition properties that are listed above in the lesson, you can reference that to try to accomplish these, or if you want to Google it. I'm also going to build these kind of along with you guys. So we'll take a minute or two, just take a stab at it, and then we can revisit and talk about it. But I'll build these along as as you guys are as well. And I'll keep my screen share on so we can walk through it. Just hit me up at any time if you have any questions or if you get stuck on anything. So let's do it. Let's make this thing a little animated. So number 1, create a p tag that has a yellow background color. So we kind of already did that with that a tag. But I'll create another one. And it's a lot of stuff. Get rid of some of that. Refresh here. Cool. Then we'll add some rules. So, sorry, I'm just going to talk out loud. If this is annoying, just ping me, let me know. So for this p tag, I'm going to use pretty much the example I did for that a tag. I just want to make it a little fuller so I can play around with it. So I'll put some padding. I'll do the display. I'll put a border on it. position relative. Left 0, and then background yellow. And just to make this different, I'm going to make the background of my A tag, I'll make that pink, just to be a little different. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, cool. So I think that'll work. I want that to be a little smaller, so I'm going to get rid of some of my text content there. So now it's that. I'm going to take out this inline block so it'll stack. Cool. Well, that's fine for now. All right. Let's see. Let's write a CSS rule that changes the background color to blue whenever you hover over the element with the mouse. So similar to our A tag example, I'm going to put a hover pseudo selector here and put a background of blue. So if I refresh, okay, cool. Easy peasy so far. Now, create a transition so that this happens over 2 seconds. So what can we do for that? I'll try transition duration. Let's see what that does. So like over 2 seconds. Let's see if that does anything. Oh, cool. Yeah, so a little bit of animation there. I can make that, if I want to make it like 5 seconds, I could. Yeah, that's fun. What else could we do? We could also do like a delay. We could try that out while we're here. So maybe I wanted folks to like have to wait for it for a second. So we could do a transition delay. And if I refresh, so it takes a minute and then it starts to fade. Cool. Sanaa says this is fun. Well, good. I'm glad you're liking it. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up in Slack if you guys, when you guys have added some of these properties. Go ahead and play around with some of these other transition properties if you want. Feel free. I'm going to take a stab. So he talks about we can put all these on one line. Let me see if I can, let's say that I had several different types of transitions that I wanted to do. Let me see if I can put these all on one line. So I think the way I could do this is, let me see if I can just do like duration. I may have to check out the documentation to see exactly how to set this up. If you want to do it all in one line, I'm just going to take a stab here. But I think you can separate them with, actually maybe just spaces. Let me see if I can do delay. And I think you need to pass in the timing, kind of like an argument there. Let me see if that works. Okay, that doesn't work. How about the transition duration? See if that does anything. It's not working either. Well, I'll check the documentation, the exact syntax on how to, if you want to put them all in one line. But we're going to look at that actually when we get into transformations. We're actually going to kind of stack those together. So we can come back and revisit that. But cool. How are we doing? 12 folks. Okay, we'll get like maybe 1 or 2 more folks, and then we'll move forward and add a little bit more complexity to this animation. Yeah, so Eric had a really good point. So he asked a question, and then he tried it out and kind of answered his own question. So that's, yesterday I mentioned like different types of questions, and that's an example of a very proactive approach. So like just grip it and rip it. Just try it out, you know? All right, cool. We have 14 thumbs ups. So let's move forward to this next section. Any questions about anything that we just did? Let me get back. I'm sharing my screen so I can't see everyone's faces. But a quick fist of 5. How are you guys feeling about transition properties? 5s, 4s? Okay.
Did anybody see one work? I didn't see a transition work.
So if you're looking at my screen share, kind of the idea is that, let me uncomment this. So when we hover, we want the background of this element to turn blue, but I'm just adding a little bit of transition specifics. So I want the duration, I want it to turn blue over the course of 5 seconds, and then I want a delay to happen. So before that animation starts occurring, I want it to like wait 2 seconds, and then it'll start the transition. So if I hover over the element, refresh here. And now it's not hovering. Did I?
Like it's working, you just have to hold it like half a second longer.
Yeah, it looks like it was like about to start every time.
Yeah. I'm even annoying myself with that delay. But Dana, that's the idea, is just being able to manipulate kind of the effect with different properties and such. I'm happy, I can Slack this code out if you guys want. So I'll select this out, and then we will add some more complexity to it. So that's my CSS, and then here's, I'll just send out kind of the body, my HTML section here. Cool. All right, so let's move forward. Let's add some more complexity to this. So for this one, we're going to start talking about keyframes. Are those little in-betweener steps that CSS is going to build for us. So transitions are great from going from one state to another, but sometimes you need more than a start and an end state. To do this, there are 2 steps. So if we want to get a little bit more specific as far as what do we want CSS to do in between the start and the end state, if we want to like be really detailed and specific, this is how we would do that. So step 1 would be to create a named animation with a set of keyframes. So in this example that I put into Slack, there's a keyframe that is created here, and the name of the keyframe is called example. So you can kind of think about it as naming a function. So you define a function, you give it a name that you can then reuse later in your code. It's kind of the same principle. So we're using a device called keyframes, and we can give this specific keyframe a name. So in this example, we're literally calling it example. And so if we want a particular element to adhere by these set of keyframe rules, all we need to do is use that example, the name of the keyframe is example, so we can plug that example into whatever rule we want. And so we're going to take a look at how to do this. So step 2 is once you define a keyframe, you need to actually put it on the element that you want to adhere to those keyframes. So in this example in Slack, we use the property called animation-name. And the animation-name, the value of that is the name of whatever set of keyframes you want to use. So in this example, this div element is going to use the animation name of example. So it's going to, whatever that keyframe, whatever those keyframes include, for example, this div is going to adhere to those rules. And then finally, step 3, and again, this is just a really quick rundown if you want to check out the documentation for like more specifics and details. But a couple of the options that this animation property gives you is animation timing, animation iteration count. So do I want this animation to happen 10 times? Do I want it to happen 1 time? Do I want it to happen indefinitely and really tick my users off? Like, stop my cards from spinning. That's really annoying. Animation direction's pretty cool. So what if I want this animation to go in reverse order? You could set that property. Animation delay, just like we saw earlier with that hover delay. And then animation play state. So do you want the animation to pause at a certain interval? Do you want it to stop running, to start running? So you can get really specific with some of these properties. But let's actually build a keyframe in the example that we're working on right now. So here's another udo/we do. I'll put this here into Slack. So for this one, let's create a new box with a background color. It can be, you know, whatever you want. And over the course of 4 seconds, we want this box to move right and change background color, move down and change background color, move left and change background color, and then move up to its original location and change background color again. So again, I'll stay on mic. I'm just going to talk this out and kind of build this. If you guys want to follow along, or you know, feel free to hack on this on your own. But I'm going to walk through this if you guys want to watch. So to start, let's build a box like it asks. I'm just going to build a div. I'll give this as a class of box1. We're going to be creating some more boxes in the next few minutes. So I'm going to make this one box1 to be a little bit more specific. And let's make a background color for this box. Well, I'll give it some height and width. I'm going to, I'll just make this 100 px by 100 px. And I'll give it a background. I'll give it red to start. Why not? Cool. All right, so there's our funky little red box. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds or a minute or so to hack on this. See if over the course of 4 seconds, if you can make this box move right and change color, down and change color, you know, kind of do a square. See if you can make it move on the page and change colors. And I'll give you guys a minute or two to hack on that. If you do have a solution or an answer, pop it into Slack, or if you want to come on mic and kind of walk us through it. And then I'll walk through a way to implement that. But it's probably going to, well, we'll need to create keyframes. And you can reference the keyframe example that's in the README. So that's a really good start. In fact, you can probably just use that exactly to make your keyframe. And then we'll need to use that animation name property and set that value to that example keyframe. And we're going to need to put that on our box rule, box1 rule. All right. Give me a quick thumbs up in Slack on that you do screenshot if you got that working, if you got like step 2 working. Oh, cool, got a thumbs up. It's like Aaron got it working. It's like Zach got some functionality working, cool. Okay, cool, a couple of thumbs up, that's great. Awesome. Cool, so I'll go ahead and kind of start talking through this process while you guys continue to work. So as we discussed, the first step is to create a named keyframe, which looks kind of like a function, or it's the same concept as a function, I guess. It's something, a set of behaviors or rules that you can reuse. So here in my animate.css, I'm actually just going to copy the example from the README because this is, I think this is pretty much, hint, hint, this is pretty much the keyframe that will accomplish what we're asking for here. And you guys have probably deciphered this on your own, but the great thing about keyframes is that it goes from 0% to 100%. And so that represents the time, the duration in between the start state and the end state. So in this example, I have kind of like 4 different things that I want to happen during this keyframe transition. Now maybe I just wanted one thing to happen like halfway through at 50%. Or maybe last night when I was creating that blackjack example, I think I made like 8 different keyframes. So like, you know, at 15% of the duration, I want it to spin and move here, and then at like 30% of that duration. So keyframes are a lot of fun. You can like really get specific. You can put different different properties, different animations on each keyframe. They don't even have to be consistent. So it's pretty cool what you can do. Sorry, it's my dealer calling. So this is what a keyframe definition would look like. So I'm going to use, I'll just use example here. I'll keep that named keyframe. The next thing I want to do is I want to add it to this box 1. And so to do that, we're going to use this animation name property. And again, the exact keyframe I want to use is the keyframe named example. I can also put in a duration. So let's say that, so we can really get a sense of this, I'll make this over like 4 seconds. And again, all of this code's in the README. So this, again, is going to be the start state of this box, and then the keyframes are defining the different animations that are going to occur leading up to the end state of the box. So let me refresh and run this. Let's see what happens. Okay, cool. So at least the colors changed. That's good. But I'm missing one thing. I need to be explicit with my positioning. So let me put a position relative here. So I need to use that position relative in order for these specific left top coordinates to work. I need to make sure to put that positioning property on there. So I think this should work. Let me refresh. Cool. So there we have a fun little animation going. Did anyone get this step 3 here? So step 3, have this animation loop indefinitely and alternate direction. Did anyone get step 3? I'll put this into Slack. So did anyone get the have this animation loop indefinitely and alternate direction? So it looks like Zach did get the infinite loop going. That's cool. Zach, you want to come on mic and walk me through how to implement that infinite loop?
Sure. So I just used one of the things from the additional properties in the README, the animation iteration count,
Nice.
which can be set to infinite.
Cool. By the way, did you guys see how easy that was with Atom? I'm going to do that again. Atom is just amazing. I just start typing like AN, and it gives me all of my choices. Animation, iteration count, and then infinite is like, man, Atom just, I'm so lazy. Thanks, Atom. Cool, so let's refresh the page, and let's see how annoying this thing is. Yeah. Cool, yeah, so that's going to go infinitely until my new computer arrives. Let's get really annoying. I'm going to put this at like half a second. Oh boy. That will drive you nuts. All right, I got to stop that. That's annoying. Cool, so that's how we would do it in an infinite fashion. What if we wanted to reverse the animation and have it go kind of in the reverse order? How could we do that?
Animation direction.
Cool. And so what was the value for that one? What value did you put in here?
I didn't. I just read the list of.
Oh, okay. No, that's awesome. So if you're looking at Atom, if you're looking at my screen, so animation direction has a couple of potential values. So there's alternate reverse, normal, and reverse. So actually, I'm going to try alternate. Let's see what that does. So I'll save that. And it's moving. Cool. So it's just going to alternate direction. That's fun. Little memento action here.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
can you put all these animation like specifications under the keyframes example, or does it have to be under the actual thing you're animating? Can you like make the animation come with all that?
Take 60 seconds and try that out, and then let us know.
I guess we'll never know.
I don't think you can put the actual animation information in the keyframe itself, because these animation properties are referring to the keyframe itself. So I don't think you can include them, but like try it out and check my math on that. Just to demonstrate kind of the power of these things, let's add maybe like, 10% into this thing. Let's think of something really goofy. Maybe I want the height to go to like, I don't know, 500 px. Let's just see what that does. So again, at 10% through this keyframe, I haven't used height anywhere else, which is totally cool. And I can just throw in these percentages at different points in time when I want these events to happen. So let me refresh. Let's see how nasty this thing looks. Oh boy. That's interesting. So yeah, like 10% through that 4-second loop, the height adjusts, and then it kind of slowly eases back to the initial state of 100 px. So just to kind of demonstrate what you can, the variety of stuff you can do in these keyframes. Cool. Rachel, alternate reverse. Alternate reverse. Yeah, let's try that one. And I'll slack out these two rules for you guys.
And we can't do it on click, right? Because we need to do an event handler. We can only do hover.
No, actually later in the lesson, you can totally use JavaScript to click a button to make this stuff happen. You can do anything you want.
But we can't do like semicolon click, like we can do semicolon hover, right?
You mean colon hover?
Yeah, sorry.
Try it out, man.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Then, sure I'm not doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'd have to check the documentation. I've actually never tried a colon hover on this. But it sounds like you're doing it right. I mean, we can try it.
Yeah, you gotta like keep your mouse on it. It's the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's not even rendering. Interesting.
Yeah, it won't render because you have to hover over it to make it render. So you have to make 2 boxes, and then one is just that, and the other one's with the animation with hover.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point, because you need that initial state. Yeah, I can hack on that later.
Okay.
I haven't tried it. Let me slack out this code in case you guys are missing anything. So here's my those 2 CSS rules. Yeah, again, like CSS is so much an art versus a science sometimes. So, you know, like last night with that blackjack, it's like I knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't entirely positive on how to accomplish it. So while I was watching Cam Newton, you know, floss and get his brain scrambled, I just kind of played around with it. It was a lot of fun, actually. I think CSS, unlike JavaScript, like you can kind of mindlessly just like play in the sandbox. So it's really great if you're like watching TV or something. I love doing CSS. Cool. Okay, let's move forward. So actually, kind of to Adam's point, let's incorporate some sort of JavaScript or jQuery. Let's see how we could accomplish some animations using a more JavaScript approach. So what about using jQuery for animations? We'll put this into Slack. So you can absolutely use jQuery for animations or JavaScript for that matter. There's a lot of great libraries. We're going to take a look at one here in a few minutes to accomplish animations. But why might using CSS be more advantageous than using JavaScript for this stuff? Well, I mentioned earlier that, you know, it wasn't too long ago in the past few years, historically you had to use JavaScript for any type of manipulation or any type of animation type behavior because CSS was pretty janky. It was just for like changing the font size and colors. But CSS3 has come such a long way that you can accomplish much of the same behavior using CSS3 that previously required JavaScript. Now, why would it be advantageous to use CSS3 versus JavaScript or jQuery? Well, it says here in what I pasted into Slack, one huge advantage is depending on the complexity of your application. If I only wanted to do like one animation using jQuery, I would still have to pull in the entire jQuery library. Now, the jQuery library isn't like the biggest, most dense and largest library out there. It's not necessarily going to kill your app. But with CSS3, I don't have to incorporate any kind of extra file or any kind of extra library because CSS3 is built into the browser, right? So CSS3 is arguably a little bit more lightweight than using jQuery or some other JavaScript library. Now, if you're dealing with multiple jQuery, if you're dealing with jQuery, to do like event handling and other functionality in your app, and you already have jQuery in your app already, it's certainly not that big a deal to just use jQuery for the animations as well. But if you just are trying to accomplish an animation or something, there's definitely something to be said for strictly doing it old school and using CSS3, which is super powerful nowadays. All of that being said, let's take a look at using jQuery to animate an element if you wanted to. I'm going to use fade in as an example. It's a very simple, basic example. There are a ton of these methods in jQuery, and in fact, you probably have already discovered them and played around with them. Let's take a look at a very simple fade in example. So if you guys want to follow along, I'm just going to put this into the app via the lesson README here. And actually, I'm going to turn this thing off if you guys don't mind. I hope this isn't driving you too nuts. I'm going to comment that out for now. Whew, okay, cool. All right, so for this example, let's add another div, and let's give it a class name of box2, or an ID, either one. IDs here in the README. But Adam, when you create a new div, it gives you class by default. So, but to stay consistent with the README, I'll make this an ID. So I'll change this to ID. And just so, because we're going to add another box in a minute, I'll put box2 in here, just so there isn't any confusion as to what element is what. So go ahead and create a div, give an ID of box2. And then the next step is let's make this thing render. Let's give it a little bit of CSS. So down here, I'm going to create a rule for box 2. And I'll give it a background of blue and a display of none. And then I refresh my page, and I should see nothing. So if I'm using a jQuery method called fade in, why would I need to set the initial state of my element to display none? Does someone want to come on mic and break that down for us?
I think fade in is literally going to fade in like this. So you'll want it to start off as nothing so that it kind of does that, I think.
Yeah, that's perfect. Because actually underneath the hood, fade in addition to like passing in the duration, how long you want this thing to take, fade in literally goes in using JavaScript and changes the display property to, I think, display block. So it goes from display none to it changes it to block so that it's visible. So if I didn't like hide this box to begin with, fade in is not going to work for me because it's already visible. The same principle applies with fade out, kind of the opposite of fade in, obviously. So that'll take an element and change it from display, or actually you don't even have to have display on the property. When you click fade out, it adds display none to that element, so it disappears. So let's add some JavaScript. I'm going to do this really janky. I'm just going to put a script tag. We'll do this inline. So my HTML here at the bottom of my HTML, I'm just going to create a script tag for this little bit of JavaScript. And yeah, let's make a jQuery object from our box 2. So box 2, I need to make sure to give it the pound or the hash. And then I'll do fade in. And fade in, you can give it a callback if you want, like a callback function. And you can also pass in the duration. So with CSS, the duration can be in seconds. With JavaScript, remember that we're going to have to do this in milliseconds. So this 3000 is 3000 milliseconds, which would be 3 seconds. So I'm going to save that, and let's see if this works for us. Yeah, so there we go. So over the course of 3 seconds, and actually I'm not going to do it here, but if you're rendering this in your Chrome browser, I would encourage you to inspect this blue box element and look at the CSS properties. And when you refresh the page, you'll notice that that display none changes to a display block. So if you want to check that out. I'm going to make this a little better. I'm just going to put a height and width just to clean it up a little bit. Make it a little cleaner there. Cool, there we go. Yeah, so that's an example of using jQuery. So we could have accomplished the same thing using keyframes or using, transformations or transitions that we looked at earlier. But jQuery underneath the hood is probably using some of these CSS properties if you look in their source code. So if you want to do it in a more concise way, you can totally use jQuery to do the same thing. Another cool jQuery method is animate. So this gives you a couple more options. I'll paste this into Slack. We'll take a look at animate. And again, you want to go through the documentation to really get a deep dive on this. I'm just going to take a look at a pretty basic example. But with animate, you can use some of those animate properties that we looked at earlier, the kind of the longhand version that we coded out. So let's look at the jQuery animate method in action. So to do this, I'm going to go through this example that's in the README here. I'm going to create a box, and I'll call this box, I'll give it an ID of box 3, just to keep them different. Just an empty div here. And for this one, and again, I think Adam was kind of in the ballpark of this earlier, let's actually add a jQuery event handler. And so I'm going to add a button that will fire off this animation when we click it. So let's see an example of that. And to do that, I'm going to add a button element underneath that third div. And I don't really need a name for this, because I'm only going to have one button on the page. If I had multiple buttons, I would absolutely want to put an ID on these buttons, like to be really precise. But for now, for this example, we can just leave it with button. And I'll put toggle in here, because we're actually going to use a jQuery toggle method so that when we click it, it does one thing. When we click it again, it like does the opposite. It's a toggle effect. So that's our HTML. I'm going to pop over here to our CSS, and let's add a rule for our box 3 element. And I'll do our handy position property. I'll put relative. And I'll give this a background of green. I'm also going to put that height and width in here, just so we can give it some, we can fatten it up a little bit. Cool. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. So we have our goofy little green box, and we have this toggle button. And right now the toggle is not working. So the way that we can make, I'm going to add an animation that will, you can see here in the README, when this toggle button is hit, I want to affect the height of this box. So here's the code in the README that we're going to use. I'm going to create an object for button because I'm attaching this event handler to my button, right? So when I click this button, I'm going to put a callback function that will fire when I click the button. Now let me put a box 3 in here too. Just a little bit of text, just so we can keep it separated. Okay, so let's create an element for button, or excuse me, create an object for our button elements. And I'm going to attach a click function. I'm going to go back and refactor this and change this to a .on in a minute, because .on is kind of the preferred way to do this. So we'll clean that up in just a second. So we're using the click method, passing in this callback function. So now I need to create a jQuery object from our box 3 element. So we're going to create a nice little jQuery object from that. And I'm going to attach this animate method. And if you go through the documentation, what animate is looking for is it's looking for an object. It can be like an anonymous object. You don't have to name it. And you want to pass in the properties that you want to animate or to manipulate. So in this example, we're going to do it pretty simple. We're just going to pass in height. And we're going to call toggle. And toggle is the jQuery method. And at the end of this, we can also give it the duration. And all this is, from the documentation. So when I click the button, I want to animate the box. And over the course of 4 seconds, I'm going to toggle the height. So let's make sure that this is working. So I'm going to refresh here, and fingers crossed, let's click our toggle button. And there we go. So again, the cool thing about toggle, so toggle just did kind of a fade out. And now if I hit it again, toggle will fade it back in. So there's several varieties of these methods in jQuery. There's show and hide, fade in, fade out. So maybe if you want those individual animations, you can do that. Or you can use toggle, which will actually, with one button or one event, if you click it once, it'll fade in. Click it again, it'll fade out. So if you want to kind of do both pieces of animation, jQuery has methods that will kind of kill two birds with one stone, if you will. And so this is an example of that using that toggle. Pretty exciting stuff, folks. Do we have to specify a height? Actually, I don't think you do for this example. Let's check that out. So, sorry, I meant to just comment that out. Let me comment out height and width on our box 3. Yeah, so you don't have to. However, I will say this. If we didn't have that text within this box, then this box wouldn't even exist. We couldn't even see it. So that's why I put some dimensions on it. Let me exaggerate this a little bit. I'm going to put like 600 on the height. Whoa. I can get to my toggle button down here. All right, that's too big. Let me do like 400. I can't even get to the button. Cool, so if we toggle, yeah, and then if I want that to be even faster, we change that to 1 second. So let me refresh here. There we go. Isn't that fun? It's like a little window shade. Cool. All right. So again, I'm sharing my screen. I apologize for sharing my screen so long. So I can't see everyone's lovely face, but any questions about this idea of using jQuery to accomplish some of these, animations and such? Flipping through my faces. Cool, okay. Looking pretty good. So Jason's isn't working. All right, let's take a minute and check Jason out. I'm going to stop my share. So I want to show you guys one more way to accomplish animations, then we're going to take a break. So let's take a look at Jason real quick, and then we'll take a break here shortly. So Jason, you want to share your screen? We'll take a look.
Sure. I still got some things left over from when I was playing around with a bunch of stuff, but here's the button and the script and all that, and the fade in is working on this box too.
Okay.
Maybe I missed something.
I see. Can anyone point out what Jason's error is? I already see it. Go ahead and put it into Slack if you can see what Jason's missing.
I feel like it's something to do with that height.
No, it's on line 32. Does anyone see what we're missing here?
Missing the hashtag.
Yeah.
The ID hashtag.
All righty. Well,
Nicely done, guys.
I don't know.
Mine's not working either, but I have the hash.
Yeah, I'm same here. I've got the hashtag. Mine's not working.
Okay. So I'm happy to help you guys at break if you want. For the short term, I'll paste my code, my working code into Slack. So if you guys want to reference that, and then I can take a look in just a minute and we get to break time if that's cool. So let me put in my HTML here. I'm just going to paste in kind of the new code, and then I'll put in my CSS here as well. Cool. So there is my the little bit of HTML that I added, and then some CSS for that box with the ID of 3. Cool. So just really quickly, I wanted to take, this is kind of a bonus thing I threw in this morning when I was thinking about it. But I wanted to quickly show you guys, I mentioned that there's just a ton of pre-built libraries that will do all sorts of funky stuff, all sorts of funky animations for your app. And so instead of writing this stuff out longhand, you can just grab these libraries, and they're very user-friendly, and it's kind of a plug-and-play situation. One of these libraries is one of the, I've used it before when I've been in a pinch. It's really lightweight, and it's really, kind of cool for small animations. And I know that I misspelled annotate. I just saw that in the README. I'll fix that. But the library is called animate.css. So if you want to click on the link in the README, or you can go to the link I just pasted into Slack. So this is an example of a really quick and easy plug-and-play animation library. So someone has gone through and kind of created little capsules of functionality for each of these animations. And so this is a pretty lightweight, quick way to do it. And I quickly wanted to just show you guys how to pop this into your app if you wanted to use some sort of library like this. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen one more time, and we can walk through if I wanted to pop in some sort of third-party library into my app. So if you go to animate.css, I really like this one because the documentation is pretty good, and this thing is pretty bare bones and simple. You have the different types of animation here that this library will provide, and you can kick the tires here. So if I want to see what shake looks like, I can check that out. Bouncing entrances, that's kind of fun. Fading entrances, kind of flip ins, rotating out, things like that. Zoom in and down. So you can customize these, and again, these are all animations that you could build yourself, but if you just don't want to deal with it, or if some of these tickle your fancy, you can certainly use a library like this. So let's walk through how to incorporate this into our app. I'm going to click this. So you can download the CSS file directly if you click on here, and it'll download it. But I wanted to show you guys kind of a quick and dirty trick. So let's say that I wanted to use this via CDN. So remember, CDN is when the library or the code is hosted somewhere else, and we put a link to that code within our app. So I wanted to show you guys a kind of a fun hack. If a CDN doesn't exist, you can still grab the code and use it like a CDN. The way I'm going to do that, I hope this works. I'm sure it's going to work. But you can click this view on GitHub, and I'm going to go to the actual GitHub repo where this project lives. I'm going to click on animate.min.css, or you can do animate. We'll just do animate.css. So this is the actual file that I just downloaded, except here it's hosted up on GitHub. And you can look through here and you can check out kind of the nuts and bolts of what this library does. And you can notice, like, this is all stuff that we've already gone through, like all these animation, iterations, but someone just kind of like encapsulated and created these quick and dirty ways to do it. Now, I'm going to use this like a CDN. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on raw, and you guys have probably already figured this out on GitHub, but raw just gives you the contents of the file. There isn't any other decoration or ceremony around it. It's only the contents of the file. I'm going to use this as my CDN. So I'm going to copy this link, and I'm going to go back to my HTML. I'll put this into my head, and I'm going to put it above my, I'll put it above my link tag, just in case I wanted to add any of these rules in my style sheet directly. I'm going to make sure that I load this first. Make this a little bit bigger. So again, right here for this link tag, the href, I'm going to paste in the HTTPS, the link on GitHub where this raw version lives. And this should work. We should be able to ping this externally. Now, obviously, it probably is cheaper, like just to download the file and put it into my project. It's going to be a little quicker. But I just wanted to demonstrate what this does. So I added it to my project. Let me go back and let's see how we can add these to our elements. So if we go to the main GitHub documentation here, basic usage. So we're including it Oh, actually, they do have a CDN hosted version, but we're doing it the kind of the fun black hatty way. So to get this thing to work, add the class animated to the element you want to animate, and then you also add the specific feature or the specific animation that you want to incorporate. So I'll do this on I'll do it on this lorem ipsum box since we already have it, this p tag. So I'm going to add a class. I'm going to click on my p tag. Let's do class. So again, the documentation says that we need to start any of these with animated. So I'll do animated, and then let's play with, I don't know, let's try rubber band, I guess. Is that camel case? Yeah, rubber band, camel case. So then I do rubber band, and let's refresh, and let's see if this thing works for us. Why didn't you work for me? Let me try a different one. And here's an example of how it works. Let me try bounce. Maybe rubber band because it takes up the entire width. Let's see if that'll work for us. That's not working either. Crap, I wanted my GitHub hack to work. All right, let me try this one more time with the actual official CDN. Let me copy that one more time. Need to clean this up a little bit. So let's see if this will work for us. Still didn't work, huh?
You're missing your closing apostrophe or quotes for your href.
Oh yeah, I deleted one too many. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, so it's just that easy. So you can grab the CDN if you want, and then for this particular library, you put animated and then the name of the animation you want to include. It's just that simple, folks. Again, we walked through how to do this kind of the longhand way, but there's a ton of libraries like that with all kinds of funky animations if you want to Google for them. But this is another like quick and dirty way to add animations to your app if you're so inclined. I find that it's really easy to go overboard with these things too, and you've got like stretches and bounces and fade-ins, and it's just really annoying for the user. But anywho, a nice little polish for your applications. Any questions before we take like a 5-minute breaky poo?
In that last example, did you put anything in your CSS, or you just did it all in the HTML?
Yeah, it was all HTML. All that I did is put the class attribute, animated bounce. So yeah, you can incorporate it in your CSS file if you want, but you don't even have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Zarilla, I will share out my link here shortly. So let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at like 12:51, and we'll look at some transitions before lunch. Okay, so I'll see you shortly.
How long is the break?
4 minutes now.
Thank you.
Yeah, come back at 12:51. I'll put that into Slack right now. All right, folks. Welcome back. So I know that we're like moving at a pretty good clip this morning with CSS animations and such. So I just want to do a quick check-in with you guys and see if there's any questions about what we just went over. Again, the reason that we're kind of moving through the CSS stuff is because CSS is absolutely something that we find that students kind of like really dig into and start investigating on their own. And so we're not spending not doing a deep dive on these concepts, but just trying to make you aware that they're out there, because if they are of interest to you, then obviously you're going to want to, have fun with them and incorporate them into your apps. So that being said, would someone like to come on camera and explain what keyframes do for us? Kind of the process of adding an animation. The process of adding an animation using CSS, specifically using keyframes to accomplish that. Could somebody maybe teach back to us what we just went through with keyframes?
The keyframes are like each transition in the process between point A and point B.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great explanation. So we have a start point and an end point, and the keyframes is all of the stuff in between. And CSS lets us define those if we want. So we can get really specific. For example, the box that we created that, over 4 seconds kind of went left, right, up, down, and such, and it changed color.
Are you sure that's not the opposite? I thought the keyframes is where it ends and the point is transitions.
Well, remember that we created the keyframes object that had 10% of the way through this transition, do this. At 25%, I want it to.
Oh, and you mean, got it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't worry so much about the semantics, just like the idea that we can define what CSS is going to build for us. Yeah. And then just to follow up on kind of the jQuery examples and that animate.css library that I showed you guys. So again, those are tools that you can do it longhand with CSS3, or you can use those types of tools to incorporate animations. So either way is fine. But it's really nice to know what's going on under the hood, like what jQuery is actually doing when it's fading in or fading out. So I think that'll it definitely gives you a little bit of a leg up, just having that insight into what's going on under the hood. You don't have to memorize it. I look at that documentation all the time to kind of figure stuff out, and that's fine, because there's definitely bigger things to try to commit to memory. Not that you should memorize stuff, but there's definitely more bigger concepts that you will want to try to retain. This kind of stuff you can always look up. Okay, so let's move forward. We have about 35 minutes before lunch. So I wanted to talk about another type of CSS fun kind of animation type property tool that you can use, and it's called transformations. So these are a little bit more 2D. Generally, you use these for like 2D types of animations. We're going to take a look basically at 2D type of animations here in the lesson. But you can use 3D animations as well, because CSS3 has gotten so powerful that a lot of the stuff that used to require JavaScript, you can accomplish with CSS3. So let's take a look at some examples. Just kind of want to wet your whistle. Man, where am I getting these old-timey things today? All right, so the objectives, before we get to lunch, let's take a look at the CSS3 transform property, how we can manipulate elements in a 2D space. If we have time, we'll look at how to manipulate them in a 3D space. And then why using transform for animation is better than using position. But let's just get started. Let's hop into it. We'll hit some of the greatest hits for this particular property. And I used transformations last night when I was playing around with my blackjack visualization. So these things certainly come in handy. So to use CSS3 transform property, a couple of the options we have available to us are rotate. and you can pass in a degree as an argument, depending on 0 to 360. You can actually go over 360 if you want something to rotate, in an even greater exaggerated fashion. But there's rotate, there's scale. So if you want something to suddenly appear larger or smaller, that kind of pulsing type of effect, you can use scale. Translate X, so there's translate X, there's translate Y. There's a way to flip elements like on the X or the Y axis, or move them around on the X or Y axis. There's skew, so skew is kind of like, we'll take a look at an example. It's like if you stretched a piece of paper diagonally, right? Or a rubber band or something diagonally, it skews it. So that's the idea of skew. And like the previous properties we looked at, you can also put these very easily on one line. So you can use the property transform, and then you can add the different other transformations on that one line as values for that property if you really want to stack them together. Okay, enough talking. Let's actually, let's see one of these things in action. So I'll put these 4 steps into Slack, and we'll walk through them together. We can use the same, you know what, let's actually create 2 new files just to keep these separate if you guys are cool. I'll put this into Slack. So in your folder, go ahead and touch a transform.html and a transform.css, just so we can kind of keep these 2 skills separately, or separate. Cool. So go ahead and create a new HTML and new CSS file. I'll do the same. And then if you want to go ahead and scaffold it out using HTML. I don't think we're even going to need jQuery for this, so don't worry about throwing jQuery into the mix. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And go ahead and give me a thumbs up in Slack when you get that working, if you don't mind. And all of the code that I'm using and working on is going to be in your repo. So I'll push that as soon as we're done. So you'll always have this for reference. Then be sure to link up your that new CSS file. I need to do that. Cool. All right. Got about 10 thumbs ups. Okay, so let's move forward. Let's get started here. So I'll be sharing my screen again, so if you want to follow along. But the first thing we want to do is let's create a 100 by 100 px square box that has a background color. So that's going to be our first step, and then we're going to rotate it 45 degrees. So let's see what that looks like. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. So create a div. I'll give this a class of box, like box 1, just in case we add some other divs and stuff, which we probably will. So I'll create a rule for box 1, and I'll give this a height and width 100 px and 100 px, and give it a background color of yellow. Yes. I'm going to put some text in here, just like this is box 1, just in case we add some extra elements. Cool. So let me refresh that, and we have that awesome looking box. Pretty good start there. Okay, cool. So the next thing, let's try to rotate it 45 degrees. So for this one, let's use the transform property from the lesson. And let's give it a rotate. So rotate, in the parentheses, we need to tell it the degrees that we want to rotate this element. I'll put in like 50 degrees in here. So 50 DEG. Then I refresh, and there we go. So we just rotated our box 50 degrees. Pretty exciting stuff. Cool. The next step, so let's play around with the scale. So let's scale this box so it's twice as big. So to do that, we can actually just keep adding these transformations on this one line. So let's do a scale. And let's make it twice as big. Cool. Not quite as exciting as the animations we did earlier, but still pretty cool.
That make that box flash.
Make it flash. I think for that we would need an animation. I don't think transformations are more like more in space. We actually are going to like flip it around here in a minute. So hang tight. This is going to get sexier by the minute. So we've scaled it. Now let's play around with the translate X and Y properties. So this fourth step, let's translate it along the x-axis by 200 px. So let's see what that looks like. And again, the great thing about the transform property is that if you want to stack these things, you can put them all on one line, which is really nice. So let's do translate x, and we'll do 200 px. Whoa. Crazy. So it moved a little bit on the x-axis. It kind of like, positioned it differently there in the browser. But yeah, there's translate X, translate Y, and translate Z. So the Z-axis would be kind of like that fourth dimension, like coming at you, would be translate Z. So yeah, just a couple of examples of very simple transformations. Give me a thumbs up if you guys got that working. Would anyone like me to Slack out my CSS code? Would that be helpful? I see some thumbs up. Would you like me to Slack it out, or is that like, yeah, I'm killing it? I'll pop it into Slack just for funsies, in case you guys need it. See, Fridays are fun, man. All right. Cool. So that's some kicking the tires of the transformations. Now let's take a look at transformations in 3D space. So more of that, kind of Z-axis type of transformation. So here's a couple of examples of how to get that 3D effect. The Z-axis extends out of the screen, and these are a couple of the properties that are available to you. So there's rotate X, rotate Y, rotate Z, translate X, translate Y, translate Z. So we just use translate X, for example. Scale X, scale Y, scale Z. And then if you know the math, you can actually write out your own transformation matrix. So you guys can absolutely check the documentation if you want to play around with these, but you can get really specific if you really know, what you're doing in that 3D space. I'm not quite there yet, but you can really customize these effects, so you can check that out. And this is a link here to Periodic Famous. I'll put this into Slack if you guys are interested in checking this out later. So Famous, this is a library that I think it was released maybe 2 years ago, and it builds on some of the cool features of CSS3, but it uses JavaScript to do it. So this is another library that you could implement into your app if you wanted. Actually, it looks like it's still in beta. Interesting. I feel like they've been in beta for a long time, but just an example of a library that'll help you with these 3D animations. If you go on YouTube, or you could just Google famous examples or famous demonstrations, you can see on this page, let me share my screen for my browser. If you guys go to this periodicfamous.us, you can see in the background there's kind of a 3D periodic table of elements. So this is kind of their most famous kind of demo example. This is what really got people excited for this technology when they were trying to raise venture capital. So if you Google this, you can see a cool demonstration of the periodic table in a 3D space. And as it says here, there's no plugins, no WebGL, no Canvas. So it's pretty cool, but I digress. If you want to check that out, you can totally check it out later. And if you click on these buttons down here, or you can see in the demo, it'll compress the periodic table into a globe shape, or maybe spread out like a Jeopardy board, or it'll do it in a spiral. It's really pretty crazy. But anywho, check that out at your leisure. Let's keep the party going with our transformations though. So I'm going to go back to Adam. I'm going to share my screen. And let's add some more functionality to this goofy yellow box. So the udos here, we can actually just use the yellow box. We don't need to create a new one. Let's add a property. Let's rotate it 180 degrees on the x-axis and 180 degrees on the y-axis. And let's see what that looks like. And make sure that you have some text in the box, because I think that's really going to demonstrate what this feature is going to do. So we can do rotate X, and let's do 180 degrees. And again, it's really cool that we can just stack these as values on our transform property. If we refresh, whoa, crazy. So now our text is kind of flipped on the x-axis, rotated rather. And then let's add a rotate on the y-axis. And we'll do 180. Crazy. So it kind of like repositioned itself, but it's still rotated. So yeah, just some examples of rotate X and Y. Also in the lesson, I'll put the screenshot into Slack, but there's actually a couple of links if you want to like dig a little deeper. Has anyone heard of a gentleman named Paul Irish? Can't see any hands, but Paul Irish, I think he's still at Google, but he's created a couple of really great, I forget what he's known for, I'm totally blanking, but he's done a lot of kind of thought leadership and actually built a couple of great libraries, and I'm totally spacing on what he created. But he has a really great Twitter following, blog articles. He's a really smart guy. But here's some code pins of really fun examples that he's actually built that are a little cooler than a yellow box. So if you guys want to check these out, I'll paste these into Slack. Jesse says Yeoman Dude. Yeah, maybe he was affiliated with Yeoman, some sort of package installer. That sounds familiar. I'm gonna Google him real quick. But he speaks a lot at conferences and stuff. He's pretty awesome. Yeah, looks like he's still at Google. Very very involved with like Google Chrome over the years. Anywho, he's a really smart guy. So check him out. So why is using transform properties, transform CSS properties, why are these better than using position? Well, there's a couple of reasons just on a high level. Number one, when elements are changed in the DOM, this is more of a performance thing. When elements are changed in the DOM, the browser checks to see if other elements are being pushed around, because in the DOM, other elements affect the elements around it. So when elements are changed in the DOM, the browser is going to see if other elements are affected. But when we use CSS transformations, the browser doesn't do this. So it can be a little bit more of an efficient strategy if you do want to have some sort of transformation effect on your page. Using CSS versus using maybe JavaScript and DOM manipulation may be a little more lightweight and a little bit less expensive on your computer's memory, on your browser's memory. And then secondly, if you're doing a 3D transformation, the computer's GPU is engaged, which is really fast. So if you use CSS3 to do some sort of, funky 3D transformation, it's actually going to pull in the computer's GPU, graphical processing unit, to actually complete that process. And so you have a little bit of extra horsepower to make those 3D animations possible. So those would be a couple of examples of why maybe using CSS is preferable to using a JavaScripty way to do this manipulation. And then let's look at one more example. I'll paste this into Slack. So let's kick what we just did. Let's kick it up a notch. So let's actually add some hover to that goofy yellow box that we created. So let's see what that's going to look like. And actually, to do this, let's create another element. Let's create a new one. So let's do this. Let's create a second box. We'll call this box 2. Just to keep them separate. So we'll call this one box 2. And then let's give it some properties here just to make it render. So for this box, let's add, we can add some padding. So that'll be around the text just to fatten it up a little bit. I'm going to use EMs for this just because we haven't played with EMs yet today. I'll do display inline block. And then let's do, let's put a border on it so we can see it nice and clearly. So do 1px solid black. And we're going to add this positioning on here, position relative. I'm going to start this off at 0. So we want this hugging that left side of the viewport. Cool. Let's see if that's rendering okay. Cool. I'll give it a background color of like red. Just so we can see a little bit better. Okay, cool. So at least we have this goofy box working. Now what we want to do is we want to add a transformation to the hover state of the element. So to do that, let's create some, we'll create a pseudo selector for hover on this box2 element. So down here, we'll do box2, and then we'll add a hover pseudo selector here. And then, like, just to test this out, I'm going to change the background to green. I'm just going to kick the tires for a second.
Mark, how'd you get it to have height and width?
The padding is doing that for us.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do height and width if you want. I just use padding in this example. So the padding is like 2 EMs around that center piece of content. So that's what's kind of fattening up.
Got it.
Yeah. Cool. So at least our hover pseudo selector is wired up and working. So that's good. Let's add some other stuff here. So I'm going to make on hover, let's make this thing go left 100 px. So in addition to turning green, I want it to also, okay, so it's doing it, but it's not very like subtle. But at least the transitions are working, so that's good. But we're gonna make this a little more elegant. So we've got left, and then just for funsies, I'm gonna change the padding. I'm gonna give it 4 PM of padding when I hover over it. I'm just trying to make this really annoying and obvious here. So when I hover over it, it moves left, turns green, and the padding, it gets a little larger. Cool, okay. So now let's make this a little more fluid. Let's add some of these transition properties to our box element. And this is from the last section of the lesson that I just pasted in. So we're going to play around with the transition property. So if you want to go back up to your box2 rule, and let's add transition right there. And I'm going to add one. We'll just do this one step at a time. Let's see if we can add a duration of like 2 seconds. Let's see if we can make this a little less janky. So I refresh the page. That's cool. So yeah, a little bit smoother, a little nicer. Oh, my dog. Sorry, guys. So yes, that works pretty nicely. What are some other transitions that we can use? So it says here in the exercise, so adding a transition on the transform property so that it animates in and out. So I have a little bit of that working. But make sure that the transition is not in the hover rule. So actually, we just did that pretty nicely because the hover is, we have our starting and our end state. So the hover is kind of the end state when we hover over an element. And we didn't have to put any of that transition property, any of those properties in the hover pseudo selector section at all in this rule here. We could accomplish all of this by putting it in the transition, in the original box to class rule up here. Let's play around with, let's add one or two more here. So let's do like a transition. And let's see if I do a transition property of left. Let's see what this is going to do. Yeah, so it kind of overwrites the other stuff that I had down here. It's not quite as elegant, but I don't like that. I'm going to take that out. That's not as fun as the other example. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Let's try one more thing. And so this is from the, this is directly from the lesson. Let's see what this looks like. I'll paste this into Slack. I'm going to try using this property, this transition, and then transform 1 second, ease in out. Let's see what this looks like. So I'll comment out that transition duration, and I'll add in transition. So I want this to transform over 1 second. I want it to do an ease in and ease in and an ease out type of transition. And there's other varieties of this. You could just ease in, you could just ease out, you could use a linear type of transition. Let's just check this out. So if we refresh, it's not really working the way. It's not very smooth here. We'll put that duration back in there. I wonder if that would help. You know what? I don't really like that at all. That's not doing anything for us.
Hey, Mark, that was happened to me before.
Yeah.
And when you put everything on the same line,
yeah,
it solved that problem for me.
It solved the problem?
Yeah, I don't know if you put transition, colon, and then duration, and then transform, if that would fix it or not. But
let me unshare my screen for a minute. Was that Aaron that said that? Cool. Do you want to share your screen real quick, Aaron?
Sure. Actually, it was on the animate when we were doing.
Yeah, the earlier.
Right. So now I didn't try it on this one, but I can.
Yeah, sometimes adding it on one line, they're a little bit trickier about the syntax.
So what was the other one?
Oh, so you did duration colon. You didn't have to use parentheses or anything. Oh, that's cool.
Well, I haven't tried it yet, so
okay.
It might be that I need parentheses. Is that 1 second?
Well, right now it looks like you have. Oh yeah, in the lesson, yeah, that'll be 1 second.
I don't think this is gonna work.
Yeah, I know. I think I had some more, like some more complementary properties that kind of made that all one line work a little nicer. I'll try one more thing here. Yeah, I think something is like conflicting with it. Just have to play around with that. But that's how transformations work. If you want to do this kind of manually, and you don't want to use a library or you don't want to use JavaScript, the big takeaway is now CS3 is so advanced and so powerful that there's absolutely advantages to trying to do animations with CSS first before relying on some sort of library and such. So yeah, so hopefully these will be useful. Again, there's a ton of documentation. There's a ton of tutorials on this stuff. Just want to show you guys kind of the power of what CSS can do for you. And I think that, well, all of your projects are a great opportunity to really give it a visual polish, but particularly project one, before we get into the complexity of like a full stack, you know, if you wanted to play around with some of these some of these techniques, Project One would be a good opportunity to do that. You certainly don't have to be like an expert or a master at any of this stuff. But sometimes it's a fun like visual polish to add to your applications. So cool, we're almost at time for lunch. So I know that we kind of went through a lot this morning. Let me just do a quick fist of 5. I know some folks are off camera, but how are you guys feeling about this morning's coverage? Did any of it? Again, it's not like you have to memorize it, but just as long as you can kind of maneuver around it, 4s, 5s, okay, cool. Well, again, hopefully this is, you know, a little bit of an appetizer if you're interested in this stuff. There's a lot, I think you can make a pretty good living if this is like your wheelhouse and your focus, you know, because there's very few folks that can do this really, really well and really, you know, quickly and efficiently. So if it's something you're interested in, it's definitely worthwhile. All right, cool. Great work this morning, folks. So again, after lunch, we'll have a review time. So please come prepared with any kind of questions. If there's anything you need a second pass on, please bring those to the review. And otherwise, have a great lunch, and we'll see you guys at 2:30. Happy Friday.
Bye-bye.